everyone. Welcome to today's interview organized by the International Community of Iranian Academics with two representatives from the Baha'i international community regarding the Our Story is One campaign. This global initiative marks the anniversary of the execution of 10 Baha'i women in Shiraz and Iran who were persecuted for the belief in a faith that promotes gender equality, justice, and truthfulness. The campaign aims to honor not only these 10 women, but also all the women in Iran who have been contributed to the ongoing struggle for gender equality. We have the privilege to speaking with two representatives from the campaigns in New Zealand to get further insights into their goals and initiatives. So Dr. Katek Damian, welcome. Maria, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you both with us, and thank you for accepting our invitation to join this discussion. Now, Maria, could I start with you and ask a question? Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the Our Story is One campaign and its objectives?
Okay, my name is Maria Reining-Clayton. I'm a volunteer. I work for the New Zealand Office of Public Affairs of the Baha'i community. And we're a team of 3 volunteers who work on sharing Baha'i thought to try and promote respect, human rights, and to contribute Baha'i thinking to national discourse and also internationally. So this campaign, which honors, as you said very clearly, the 10 women in Iran who were hung for not recanting their faith, it connects their sacrifice to the sacrifices of women of all faith in Iran and elsewhere that are not treated equally, that are struggling to have their human rights. And the purpose of the campaign is both to highlight the persecution of Baha'is, but also to contribute to thinking about the role of women in society, the importance of women being able to achieve their potential. And it is not just about, although we really honor these women, it's not just about that, it's about the future as well. And recognizing that the equality of men and women is an idea that, that it's now that this has to start happening. And so I guess that's the main thing. It's not just about the persecution of Baha'is in Iran. We've had, I think, a really remarkably successful media response in terms of the range of media outlets that have covered the campaign. The initial focus was social media, and the coordinators who work at the Baha'i International Community offices, which I don't, and neither does Kat, they've been super excited at some of the celebrity influencers, in the Iranian diaspora who have supported the campaign. I've paid a bit more attention to sort of mainstream media, the Australian media, Canadian media, American, Persian media, Associated Press. It's been a really long list of organizations that have provided television segments or articles. It's been picked up in India, in Bolivia. It's just really quite exciting to see the spread of the Baha'i community and of the coverage. Some of it, it's in languages like Swedish, Portuguese, Italian, German. I can't tell you the gist of it. I just know that it's being covered, and that's really exciting. And in the social media campaign, very wide range of representatives of governments and of the European Parliament have made statements in support of the campaign, and also the UN special rapporteurs for Iran and for religious rights. And I think names you will recognize like Narges Mohammadi, and we're also really grateful that the New Zealand Minister of Foreign Affairs made a comment in support of the campaign. So, and non-governmental organizations, religious organizations, and others have done that. So when the social media campaign happened on 18th of June, it actually trended internationally. And it started, it went really well. It wasn't the big thing in New Zealand. We're not on Twitter much. And I think it's also because our office was focused on the race unity speech competition in Hui, and I've been overseas, not in a good position to do a whole lot because of other commitments. So I think what the Friends have managed to accomplish in New Zealand, and what supporters of the Baha'i community have done, has been wonderful. Christchurch organized at very short notice a national memorial event that was very well attended, but it was really the quality of it that was outstanding, the feedback they've received and the comments of attendees of how moved they were. But the closing comments, the quotes that people were given to go with, and how they've been sharing this with their friends. I think the oral, the dramatic, and the musical presentations, some new songs that were shared, and that will soon be on social media. We've had all that content created for the campaign, which we'll use over the year. And hopefully, we'll be seeing performers, Baha'i and other performers and youth, maybe translating elements into Tereo or their languages, so it would increase the spread. So I think New Zealand has made a huge contribution in terms of new songs, poems, things like that. And a lot of artists around the country want to, but it takes them a little bit longer to create a body of work on those themes, because they're very serious about their art. So we're looking to have exhibitions later in the year, and there perhaps are artists in the Iranian diaspora would like to support this as well. So we'll be looking for those opportunities. So those are the things I'll say to start. Maybe I've said too much. I'll pause a bit for Kat.
It is fantastic. I actually wanted to ask Kath to give us a little bit of content and context to this campaign. Like, of course, we know this campaign is more than a specifically focus on the persecution of Baha'i community in Iran. But I would like, Kat, if you could possibly talk a little bit about this persecution and the history that we have had, in order to give a little bit of context about what happened to the 10 women. How did the Baha'i community suffer through these last 44 years in Iran? And kind of give us a little bit of comments to our audience who are not very familiar with the background of this campaign. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Nigar, and thank you, Maria, for giving us a little intro into the campaign. So, the persecution of the Baha'is of Iran has a history that dates before 44 years ago, right? So from the inception of the Baha'i faith, the Baha'i community has been severely persecuted throughout various successive governments and authorities in the country. But, something that was significant from the arrival of the Islamic Republic in terms of the persecution was the way in which the persecution of the Baha'is was systematized and, became a part of a routine, almost practice of the government. So one way of describing this is to first look at the Constitution of the Islamic Republic. The Constitution of the Republic does provide some rights and freedoms for religious minorities, but those that are considered minorities or people of the book. There's some religious freedoms given to people of Christian faith, Zoroastrian, and Jewish backgrounds. Of course, I'm not undermining some of the persecutions and oppressions that those communities also face there. They are by no means completely free, but Baha'is, despite being the largest a non-Muslim religious minority in the country, they have no protections enshrined in the Constitution. They are absent from it. And part of the, while the persecution of the Baha'is took quite a had a quite a violent history in the past, quite large mass executions, disappearance of individuals. From the 79 revolution, some of that persecution took more of a social, cultural, and economic character. So there was the kind of desire to systematically suffocate the growth of the Baha'i community and its progress by denying Baha'is access to higher education, for example, or the closing of Baha'i businesses, the denial of Baha'is to serve in public offices and positions of government, and other forms of social and cultural oppression. Now, when this incident of the 10 Baha'i women took place, it was part of a wider kind of a hostile environment where the expression of Baha'i belief was completely illegal, but also the violence that was perpetrated against Baha'is was state sanctioned. So people were able to commit acts of violence against people who were Baha'is without any fear of prosecution. So they were able to act outside of the law. And something that is significant about when these 10 Baha'i women were first arrested, these were 10 women in one city, so you can imagine what was happening across the country, but this just capturing them as one case study of the types of persecution that was happening was significant that they were all women. It was significant that they were all young, bar a couple who were in their later 40s and 50s, but predominantly they were in their 20s. The youngest was a 17-year-old girl. And their crimes were things like educating Baha'i children in moral education, having small groups of children coming to their home where they would be learning about qualities like kindness and love and unity. So these women were just being servants to their community. They were being of service to their community, and the government rounded them up. And after months of torture and interrogations, and some of the details are quite harrowing, but these are very well documented. You can find them online. There's an entire website actually dedicated to the campaign if you want to go into some of those details. And after months of interrogation and torture, they were taken to a public square where they were hanged in front of each other one by one. And they were given the choice throughout the interrogation and torture period, but also just before their hanging, they were given the choice to recant their faith or to die. That was the choice before them. Either say you are not a Baha'i, and there was one account where they said, if you just whisper it in my ear, I will let you be free, If you just write it on this little paper, I will let you be free. So something that seems like such a simple choice, but really is a testimony to the profound faith and steadfastness that these women had. That was the choice before them, recant or die. And one by one, despite witnessing each of their friends, people that they had become quite close to, none of them chose to recant their faith. And so the youngest, the 17-year-old Mona Mahmouduzad, was the last to be executed. And it is one, significant that she was a woman, but two, it was significant that she was a youth, a young woman. And when she entered, went to the gallows, and she saw in front of her the 9 women that she had gotten to know, who were her friends, some of whom she, I'm sure, was very inspired by. And she was asked once again, recant your faith. She smiled and kissed the noose and put it over her head, and this is an example that inspires many people, but we see the willingness for individuals to sacrifice their very lives for their beliefs. And that is what this case study symbolizes. Not, like Maria said, not that we are only focusing on these 10 women, but what was it that they were willing to die for? They were willing to die for their faith and a belief in equality and oneness. And we see it in the blood, tears, wounds, lives of women, girls, and other young people across Iran who are calling for the same thing. They're wanting equality, they're wanting justice, they're wanting human rights. And so there is something that connects that sacrifice 40 years ago to this moment that we find ourselves in history now.
Yes, you mentioned something, and what a harrowing story, but you mentioned something about how the Islamic Republic systematically persecuted and used this opportunity. I also remember that even now, every time that they would attack a Baha'i household, they would not only arrest them, but they would confiscate their assets, they would steal their jewelries out of their house, they would take all their belongings, in addition to creating a very wide range of violations against their civil rights, as well as the rights of practicing their faith. So there are a lot of complicated, but also very, very tangible violations that we all practice and can see in the history of these persecutions. So thank you very much, Kat, for giving us a little bit of context about this. Now, Maria, can I get back to you and ask you a little bit about the campaign again, to know that, like, what are the artistic expressions or content that you will be using in these campaigns, or the international community is using in these campaigns, in your case, in the case of New Zealand, to raise awareness about gender equality, but it's about practice and faith and all the objectives that the campaign has? Sorry, you need to unmute. Sorry.
Grant Hinden Miller has composed a beautiful song, which we've almost finished the video, which we're going to share, and the lyrics and all of that will be made available to people to perform and perhaps to translate into other languages. Steve Lockie has written 2 new songs. One is based on a poem by Di Scott, and so that element is underway, and we'll be seeing, I guess, more use in concerts and other events throughout the year, and as well as on just promoting the notion, the idea on social media. And I mentioned that quite a long list of artists have said that they want to create work. Some want to collaborate, and some, very, very honestly have said that my mother or my other relatives are there. I'm really circumspect about what I do. I can't actually involve myself, and we run into this a fair bit, because it's true. They hear from their families about the pressure they're under. Last year some youth were arrested, and they'll be confiscating property deeds and things like that to try and get them out. So they're very conscious as well as about those aspects. So I think it's, as you know, our Baha'i community is very diverse. We're not just Iranian Baha'is. We have people of all sorts of ethnicities and backgrounds, and we'll be inviting other people to take part in art exhibitions and things like that. The wonderful thing about what has happened so far is people have done it as they see fit, because that's the nice thing about how our Baha'i community operates. People can take initiative within the framework of the campaign. And so there's been memorial events in Far North and in Auckland. And I think there will be things through the year as well that where we encourage people to really understand the issues and try and make progress with building those connections and understanding not only of the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, but also the steps we can take. And we're always really mindful of the guidance of our House of Justice when we do these things, because they ask us to strive for the regeneration of Iran, but we do that in a way that is with due regard for law and order, with no partisan political agenda, with a world-embracing vision and illuminating conscience. And so that the spiritual element of what we're doing is really important. And I guess that's we through the year we'll begin to see how we can do this. And it's important that we connect with the Iranian diaspora in New Zealand, people who have their connections back in Iran, who can think of the way forward. One of the statements that was positive was actually from a mullah in Iran. So I mentioned that religious authorities had made that positive statement. So I'm looking forward to what happens. I'm looking forward to talking to you more, and maybe some of the people in your association about what they might like to do and how they might like to raise awareness and how they might want to contemplate the things that can be done. And I'm pretty sure that all those beautiful works of art that I've seen created, some of the animations, the music, that is also inspiring for people in Iran that are struggling now for their rights. Whether they're women or minorities, people who are being persecuted, but it will certainly touch the hearts of Baha'is, and I think that's important too.
Thank you very much, Maria. I actually wanted to, it's very fantastic. You mentioned something about the spiritual aspect of this campaign and how the global aspect of Baha'i faith as a faith that has been now, it's not only in Iranians who believe in Baha'i faith. And I wondered, Kat, if we could kind of continue and think about it. So when Baha'is in Iran after the revolution, although the history of Baha'is outside as a faith outside Iran goes way beyond for over 100 years, but I was wondering when this huge exodus that came after the Islamic Revolution, and Baha'is who loved Iran had to leave Iran with the families and the children, and they took with them stories and connected to the global community of Baha'is through these spiritual connections more in there. Could you give us a little bit of idea about how that connected the Baha'i community of Iran to the global Baha'i community, and how does it represent this itself after decades of interactions and communication? And give us a little bit about the global aspect of Baha'i community.
Sure. Obviously, there are Baha'is, like Maria said, around the world, from every nationality and ethnicity that you can imagine. It's the second most widespread religion in the world after Christianity, and I think that does reflect one of the central principles of the Baha'i faith, which is the oneness of humanity. So that beauty of the diversity of the human family being expressed in that way. But of course, there have been Iranians who have left Iran pre-1979 revolution, because of the 79 revolution, and since. And so you have Iranian Baha'is also across the global community, from Canada to Nigeria to Cambodia, really across the world. And because the Baha'i faith originated from Iran, there is that spiritual connection, the blood and sacrifice of the Baha'is in Iran is felt really closely by Baha'is from all backgrounds. Whether or not you're Iranian, there is something that really moves the heart and moves the soul when they think about the sacrifices, and also recognizing that had it not been for some of those sacrifices, the Baha'i faith would maybe have not spread, across the world as well. And so one is paying homage almost to the origin of the faith, and the sacred role that Iran plays in Baha'i conceptions of even world unity, because essentially, the Baha'i faith is about unity. It's about bringing about the unity of humanity. And so it originated from in a context of extreme strife and division, the ways in which diverse communities are treated in the land of Iran has not been very nice, to put it very mildly. And yet we believe so firmly in the future of Iran as being a beacon of light, that the future of Iran is incredibly prosperous. It's got a very bright future. And so, whether or not you're Iranian, actually, even whether or not you're a Baha'i, there is something that connects us to Iran that is not limited to having been born there, but one other connection that has come from that spread of the Iranians from Baha'is from Iran going globally is that, like you said, they brought the stories and their accounts with them. And there's this beautiful documentary that has been commissioned by Radio Farda that has gone and met with some of the descendants and some of the family members of these 10 Baha'i women of Shiraz, who now live in Germany, who live in the UK, and live in other parts of the world. And they went and they asked for their accounts, their stories. And it's quite compelling to realize they're alive. These Baha'i women would have been alive. 40 years ago is actually not that long ago. The mothers of some of these women are still alive, and there's an incredibly moving account of the mother of Zareen, who spoke of when she went into the room, the forensic side at the forensic department, and she saw all 10 women, and how she went and embraced her daughter in that time. And she's able to bear witness to that for the world. Everyone can now hear these stories. So one, it brings that history to life. It connects us, and it also reminds us of how those sacrifices paved the way for a future that is not just for Baha'is, it's not just for Iranians, and these creative outputs that will be running for the next year is one way of not only paying tribute to that, but also being inspired by that and translating some of those hopes and dreams that those women had into reality and practice, given all of our freedoms, particularly here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but I'm sure globally from all parts of the world. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I have one more question. Maria, what would be your aspirations? Like, this is a campaign that's going to take for a year, and we're going to have different activities and discussions, which is fantastic. Hopefully we can talk about this more. We can have more panel discussions and raise awareness through that. But of course, this is only a year, and we live in a world that everything has a very short time spans, and I was wondering whether you have any long-term aspirations or any consecutive programs, and maybe Kat can talk about it later as well. Like, how would you see this campaign materialize and has an impact after it? Like, is there a way that we can amplify these impacts, or what we see, or what you do in this campaign?
That's such a good question. I have to say that I actually want to read something that was a quote that was given out at the Christchurch Memorial, because for me, it captured really well what we're hoping the campaign will achieve. And these are actually the words of our guiding institution, the Universal House of Justice. Nothing can prevail against an idea whose time has come. The time has arrived for freedom of belief, for harmony between science and religion, faith and reason, for the advancement of women, for freedom from prejudice of every kind, for mutual respect between diverse people and nations, indeed, for the unity of the entire human race. So this is an opportunity to engage people in looking at the world and looking more hopefully at the future, and seeing that these are things that all of us can do in our lives. We can begin to make changes that contribute to that in how we engage with people, and we can look at the small actions we take within that bigger vision. So I think it's for me, it fits into that whole big framework that Baha'is look at, about the oneness of humanity, the oneness of religion, and so that's how I see it, and that's why it's so exciting for me.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Maria. Kat, what do you think? What do you think? How we can amplify the goals of this campaign? How we can make sure that this campaign doesn't end and then we don't hear from? How can we keep on this promotion of the civil rights, the religious rights of Baha'i community, but also the fact that the stories we have been talking about don't kind of disappear in waves, and they actually can have fruit not only for Baha'is, or predominantly for Baha'is of Iran, but also for others who sometimes fall into the same situations of religious persecutions, or even the gender inequality problems that we see. So I would appreciate your comments on that.
You know, I think conversations like this is a really good example of what can come from a campaign like Our Story Is One. You know, it's in the name, right? Our story is one, and building new relationships, creating new collaborations, connections that otherwise were not there, finding points of similarity, asking questions that sort of reach to the heart of what we're talking about. I think this question of what are you willing to die for is a really important question to ask ourselves. You know, when we see people who are willing to die for justice, for equality, that these are not just words, that they are very real. So how do we express that through through new bonds and through new coming together, not having this as a vying interest type. You know, it's not a campaign just about the persecution of the Baha'is of Iran, right? It is linking, it is creating linkages. It is saying, you know, the way in which your heart beats, or the way in which that mother's tears falls for the loss of her daughter, is the same pain and suffering of all the mothers who have lost their children to injustice and to oppression. And how can we use that to come together? And so we can create new spaces, not having just events, but events help raise awareness. So people who are previously not aware, they become aware, and then our hearts can come together. And honestly, the power of that, you know, previously people who were not connected are now connected, and all sorts of things are possible that will go beyond the campaign. But I think a year is quite rare for a human rights campaign. It's quite rare to have a year-long campaign. So to use that time is, we'll see. But thank you for this being one example of that, you know, bringing us together to share the campaign, but also to have others hear these stories, perhaps for the first time.
Oh, I believe we could speak about it for hours. It's almost an hour, and I can speak with you for. I am very grateful and really taken back by your bravery, by your courage, by your love to this campaign. I really hope that this campaign goes. Please, it's important that we all help each other. So any time that you would like to come and talk to us, we are more than happy to speak with you, and if we could anyway support you, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me today for this recording. I know you both are very busy. Now, Our Story, the Our Story One campaign holds a great significance in my mind in commemorating, of course, the 40th anniversary of the execution of the Baha'i woman in Iran, but also as we try to highlight in this talk about the unity, the interactions between all the women, and understanding how our sufferings are similar and how we can promote and have better ideas about justice and have a better world in general. So by honoring the bravery and struggles of the woman throughout the world, I think the international community has amplified the message of the gender equality and justice, and of course, as we spoke about, truthfulness. Now, the fact that you have mentioned some artistic expressions and involvement of women from diverse backgrounds, your campaign fosters unity and solidarity in pursuit of a more equitable world. So I think it's a fantastic campaign with lots of values. We in the international community of Iranian academics support your initiative and are committed to equality and to rights, religious rights, freedom of expression, and the rights of individuals. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining me today. And I really look forward to speak with you again in due time, and all the best for the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigar.
Thank you.